We begin today with the message of defiance from the former director of the FBI, whose indictment last night marks a radical turn, a literal hinge point in which our country ceased adhering to one of the central tenets of life in a democracy. So begins an ugly new chapter in which an unpopular ruler purges his own political party of prosecutors until he arrives at the weakest link in the chain. That link willing to do what two Republican prosecutors in good standing with MAGA refused to do over a series of years. Here's former FBI Director Jim Comey hours after news broke that he'd been indicted by a grand jury on 2 counts.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees. And you shouldn't either. Somebody that I love dearly recently said that fear is the tool of a tyrant, and she's right. But I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. I hope instead you are engaged, you are paying attention, and you will vote like your beloved country depends upon it, which it does. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
Comey there is referring to a letter his daughter, Maureen Comey, wrote to her colleagues in the Southern District of New York when she was fired from her job there. Fear, though, is Donald Trump's favored weapon as his administration blows through decades of norms and traditions and begins to actually prosecute Donald Trump's critics, something Trump has wanted to do since his first term. Brand new reporting from MSNBC reveals that it is not clear if there was any prosecutor in the office willing to argue this case. And MSNBC also reports this now, quote, prosecutors in the Eastern District were confiding to each other late Thursday night that Trump's new appointee will have a difficult time finding even one assistant U.S. attorney in her office to help her take Comey to trial. After all, just a few days ago, according to ABC News and later confirmed by MSNBC, prosecutors in U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan's office wrote a memo explaining that they did not have the evidence to indict Jim Comey, much less secure a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. But Halligan went ahead anyway, as Trump directed her to do. The flimsiness, the lack of evidence and facts in the case against Jim Comey, as it appears right now, shows us one thing important about the second Trump administration. It shows us that after years of being told no, Donald Trump has finally found the people who are willing to go after Jim Comey in a way he has wanted to do for years. What his hand-picked attorney general in his first term, Bill Barr, refused to do, and what the special counsel Barr appointed, John Durham, also found no evidence for and refused to do. Bill Barr actually wrote about Trump's hectoring him to indict Jim Comey in his book. And he wrote that he told Trump that if the Justice Department tried to prosecute Comey for handing memos about his conversations with Trump to his lawyers, it would, quote, be obviously vindictive and, quote, meet with quick defeat, end quote. Now, in his second term, Trump can say, quote, nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, and Letitia? He can force out a U.S. attorney with sterling Republican credentials and relationships in MAGA Republican circles, including atop Trump's DOJ, who refused to bring the case against Comey until he finds that weak link, one who says yes, and get an indictment of a critic he's been obsessed with for years in the matter of days. The indictment of Jim Comey, a flashing red warning sign for the health of democracy and the rule of law in the United States, is where we begin today with some of our most trusted friends and reporters. Ken Dilanian is here. He is the justice and intelligence correspondent for MSNBC. He's been tracking the story for us all week long and all day, and he has some major new developments on the workings of Trump's Department of Justice. Also with us, former Department of Justice pardon attorney Liz Oyer. She was fired by Trump's Justice Department in March after she refused to restore Mel Gibson's gun rights. And former federal prosecutor Brendan Ballou is also with us. Ken Dilanian, I understand you've got news. We start with you.
That's right, Nicole. I think you sketched out the big picture well and the large stakes here, but there's also the small picture, which is what the heck is this indictment actually about? Because there's so little detail in it. And we had assumed all day long that this indictment had to do with James Comey's relationship with his deputy, Andrew McCabe, and whether he authorized Andrew McCabe to leak a particular story to the Wall Street Journal. But it turns out that's not accurate. I've just confirmed from a source familiar that the main allegation of lying to Congress in this indictment has to do with the allegation that James Comey lied about whether he told his friend Dan Richman, who was at the time a special government employee at the FBI, whether he authorized him to be an anonymous source for reporters about stories about an FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton. So Richman would be person number 3 in the indictment, we are told, and Hillary Clinton would be person number 1. That sort of goes against what we thought this indictment was about, and it raises this question, because we don't know what the evidence is that the government has supporting their allegation that James Comey lied to Congress. Comey testified in 2017 that he never authorized anyone at the FBI to be an anonymous source for reporters. And then when he was asked about that again in this 2020 hearing, which is subject to this, which is within the statute of limitations, he said, "I stand by my 2017 testimony." So it appears that the government is saying that 2017 testimony was a lie. You repeated the lie in 2020. And the way they would prove that is if they had evidence that, in fact, Comey did authorize Dan Richman to talk to reporters about an investigation into Hillary Clinton back then. That's a very specific thing, and so it suggests to me that they think they have something. And it changes the way I am thinking about this indictment. It doesn't change, however, the big picture that you described, which is that this is a case that career prosecutors inside that office and the U.S. attorney in that office did not think was worthy of bringing forth as a criminal case. And in fact, Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney, was essentially forced out because he resisted bringing this case and also the one against Tish James. And we have new news on that score. He had a deputy, a woman named Maya Song, a very well-regarded person within that office. She was demoted when he was fired to prevent her from becoming the interim U.S. attorney because she wouldn't bring the case either. Today we have learned, my colleague Carol Leonnig, reporting on her day off, has learned that Maya Song was fired today from the Justice Department. So that bit of news, adding to this picture that the White House has essentially seized control of this Justice Department, and any figment of independence that the Justice Department may have had from the White House has evaporated in the Trump administration.
Ken Delaney in the New York Times reported last Friday night that Mr. Richman had been interviewed, I think about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, ostensibly by Eric Siebert or his deputies. Do we know if he was interviewed again in the period after Siebert was forced out? Because I think there were accounts saying that he hadn't proved helpful in moving toward an indictment of Jim Comey.
Yeah, I mean, I would be careful about, the grand juries are secret, and I don't know for sure, but I have no reason to believe that Dan Richman was interviewed again, and he did not testify before the grand jury. He was only interviewed, which suggests, that usually suggests that they believe the witness wasn't, in fact, helpful. But there are also a lot of documents, don't forget, that Kash Patel is rummaging through in different rooms inside the FBI because they are obsessed, remember, with this Trump-Russia investigation and what happened and what James Comey did and what people like Dan Richman did. And so they're going through all these documents, and it's possible they found something that suggests to them that they think that Comey authorized Dan Richman to talk to reporters. And let's think about that. Does that matter in the scheme of things? And even if that's true, there would have to be evidence that Comey didn't just forget, but that he willfully and knowingly lied to Congress. Why would he do that? He's a lawyer, after all. He worked at the Justice Department before he was the FBI director. He willingly testified in public. And why would he knowingly lie to Congress about something that really wasn't all of that, it wasn't really germane to the topic at hand, which was the Trump-Russia investigation. That was that hearing back in 2020. So I think, even if they have something that suggests that's inconsistent with Comey's testimony, it's a long way from that to a criminal conviction on perjury and lying to Congress. And that, I think, explains why so many career prosecutors were against bringing this case, Nicole.